I'm Cassandra, 32, and I've spent the last decade building my career as an art curator in New York, far from my mother, Eleanor's controlling grip. Our relationship has always been complicated, but nothing prepared me for her 65th birthday dinner at Le Bernardin. Surrounded by family in that elegant restaurant, she clinked her glass-locked eyes with me and announced with a smirk, "I'm officially cutting Cassandra from my will." The table fell silent. I just smiled and calmly said, "That doesn't matter anymore, Mom. Because before I reveal what happened next, where are you watching from?" Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to a toxic family member. Growing up in our Beacon Hill mansion in Boston wasn't the fairy tale it appeared to be from the outside. My mother, Eleanor, came from old money, the kind of wealth that's been in families for generations and shapes everything about how they view the world. From my earliest memories, she was always impeccably dressed, perfectly composed, and utterly demanding. Nothing I did was ever quite good enough. My father, William, was different. He built his own fortune in real estate development, but never forgot his middle-class roots. He encouraged my creativity and independent spirit, often to my mother's visible displeasure. Those moments with him in his study, where he'd show me art books and tell me stories about famous paintings, were the happiest of my childhood. Everything changed when I was 10. My father died unexpectedly of a heart attack, leaving behind not only a devastated daughter, but also a substantial inheritance that was supposed to be held in trust for me. Mother took control of everything, including funds that should have been separate. I was too young to understand the financial details, but old enough to feel the absence of the only person who truly supported me. Just 2 years later, when I was still processing my grief, Eleanor remarried. Richard Blackwell was a business associate of my father's, tall, distinguished, and calculated in every move. He moved into our home with his golf clubs and business suits taking over my father's spaces as if they had always been his. My mother transformed overnight, becoming even more focused on appearances and social standing. Within a year, my half-brother James arrived, followed 18 months later by my half-sister Amanda. Suddenly, I wasn't just the grieving daughter. I was the odd one out. Eleanor's favoritism wasn't subtle. While my younger siblings received lavish birthday parties with ponies and clowns, my 13th birthday passed with barely an acknowledgement. When James showed the slightest interest in soccer, he got private coaching. When Amanda wanted ballet lessons, she got them from a former principal dancer. Meanwhile, my passion for art was dismissed as impractical daydreaming. When I won a school art competition at 14, Eleanor didn't attend the ceremony. "Creative pursuits are hobbies, Cassandra. Not careers," she informed me over breakfast the next morning. "You'll join the family business eventually. Best to focus on economics and business courses." Richard wasn't openly cruel, but he reinforced every one of Eleanor's priorities. "Your mother knows what's best," he'd say whenever I protested. The Blackwell children understand the importance of family legacy. That phrase, the Blackwell children, was a subtle but constant reminder that I was a Preston, not a Blackwell, an outsider. By 16, I had learned to keep my true interest hidden. I joined the debate team and took advanced placement economics as instructed, but secretly spent weekends at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts sketching and studying. Mrs. Abernathy, my art teacher, recognized something in me and began mentioning art schools and scholarships. For the first time, I saw a possible escape. The college application process became my battleground for independence. Eleanor had my life mapped out Harvard Business School, followed by a role in the family investment firm. I applied there as instructed, but secretly sent applications to NYU and Columbia for art history. When the acceptance letters came, I finally gathered the courage to stand my ground. "I'm going to NYU," I announced at dinner, setting down my acceptance letter on our mahogany dining table. "I've received a partial scholarship for their art history program." Eleanor's face hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. We've discussed this. Harvard has already saved a place for you." "I never wanted that place," I replied, my voice shaking, but determined. Dad would have supported this. The mention of my father was a step too far. Eleanor slammed her hand on the table, making the crystal water glasses jump. "Your father isn't here. I am, and I know what's best for your future." That night, Richard came to my room with what he called a compromise. They would pay for NYU if I double majored in business. "Meet your mother halfway," he urged. "Family harmony is worth some sacrifice." I agreed, not mentioning that NYU scholarship combined with my waitressing job would cover most expenses. I was already planning my escape not just from their educational demands, but from their control entirely. The summer before college, I worked 2 jobs and sold the expensive jewelry they'd given me for my 16th birthday, building a fund they knew nothing about. The day I moved to New York was the first time I felt like I could breathe freely. My tiny shared apartment in the East Village was a far cry from Beacon Hill luxury. But every poster I tacked to the wall and every cheap mug I bought from street vendors was my choice. For the first time, I was building a life that was authentically mine brick by determined brick. New York City embraced me like an old friend who'd been waiting for my arrival. The crowded subway cars, the constant hum of activity, the museums and galleries on every corner. This chaotic, vibrant world felt more like home than the sterile perfection of my mother's house ever had. College was challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated. The business courses Eleanor had insisted on were mind-numbingly dull, but I excelled in them out of pure determination. My art history classes, though, those made my soul sing. Professor Jenkins noticed my passion during a lecture on undervalued female artists of the early 20th century. After class, she invited me to an exhibition opening. "You have an eye," she told me, watching me study a particularly striking modernist piece. "You see what others miss." That night changed everything. I met Isabelle Laurent, a French-American gallery owner in her 60s with silver hair and impeccable taste. When I nervously shared my observations about an obscure painting in the corner, she actually listened, then introduced me to the artist. "Enter with me," she offered later, sipping champagne. "The pay is terrible, but the education is priceless." I accepted immediately. The internship meant working weekends and evenings after classes, but Isabelle became the mentor I'd been searching for. She taught me to look beyond the obvious, to spot emerging talent, and most importantly, to trust my instincts. The best collections, she told me, are built by people who recognize value before everyone else does. Meanwhile, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Monthly phone calls with Eleanor consisted mainly of her questioning my life choices and reminding me of the position waiting for me at Blackwell Investments. My half-siblings, now teenagers, were becoming many versions of their parents. James already talking about Harvard. Amanda, perfecting the same condescending head tilt that Eleanor used when someone disappointed her. After graduation, Isabelle offered me a real job at her gallery. The salary was modest, but it was legitimate entry into the art world. When I called Eleanor with the news, her response was predictably dismissive. "A glorified shop girl," she sighed. "When you're ready to stop playing at careers, let us know." Her words stung, but they also strengthened my resolve. I threw myself into learning every aspect of the business. Authentication, restoration, valuation, networking with collectors. I lived in a 6th-floor walk-up with 2 roommates and ate ramen more often than not, but every day brought new discoveries. The turning point came 3 years later at an estate sale in Connecticut. The deceased owner had been a reclusive former diplomat with eclectic tastes. While other buyers focused on the obvious valuables, silver services and antique furniture, something drew me to a dusty painting hanging in a back hallway. The style was distinctive, though the signature was obscured. After careful examination, I was almost certain it was an early work by an artist, whose later pieces were now selling for 6 figures. I scraped together every penny I had, rent money, grocery money, everything, and bought it for $8,000. Isabelle thought I was crazy until I had it properly cleaned and authenticated. We sold it 2 months later for $75,000. My commission was enough to finally move into my own apartment. Tiny, but mine alone. That success gave me the confidence to take bigger risks. I began building relationships with overlooked estate attorneys and small auction houses, places where hidden treasures might lurk. I developed a reputation for finding valuable works in unexpected places. Wealthy clients began asking me to build collections for them, trusting my judgment. During this time, I met Daniel, an architect whose firm specialized in renovating historic buildings. We connected at a gallery opening where he was more interested in the building's original moldings than the art. His practical creativity and quiet confidence were refreshingly different from the aggressive ambition I'd grown up around. "You talk about art the way I talk about buildings," he observed on our 3rd date. "Like they're living things with stories to tell." Daniel became my partner in every sense, supporting my increasingly ambitious plans, accompanying me to remote estate sales, never questioning my need for independence. When I refused to touch the trust fund that had finally become available to me at 30, he understood without explanation. What no one knew, not Eleanor, not Richard, not even Daniel initially, was that I'd begun making strategic investments of my own. Every major commission I earned went toward carefully selected pieces by undervalued artists. I stored them in a climate-controlled facility under an LLC name that couldn't be traced to me. It was my secret insurance policy against ever needing my family's money or approval again. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd ended up becoming an investor after all, just not the kind Eleanor had envisioned. Instead of moving paper assets around to squeeze out percentages, I was building something tangible. Something with cultural significance as well as monetary value. 6 years into my career, I received an invitation to the annual Blackwell family vacation in Martha's Vineyard. I hadn't been in 3 years, always finding professional excuses. This time, Eleanor's assistant called repeatedly, insisting my presence was non-negotiable. Family photographs were being taken for the Blackwell Foundation's new website, she explained. I went bringing Daniel as moral support. The weekend was a masterclass in passive aggression. Eleanor introduced me as my daughter, who works in a gallery while James was our financial prodigy, despite being just out of business school. Amanda, now in law school, was the family's future legal eagle. My mother artfully steered conversations toward accomplishments I couldn't claim. Property investments, stock portfolios, trust fund management. On the last night as we sat on the veranda watching the sunset, Eleanor casually mentioned that they were concerned about my financial future. "We've set aside a position for you," she said, as if offering a tremendous favor. "Something suitable for your creative background. The family art collection needs proper management." I nearly laughed aloud. The family collection consisted mainly of safe investment-grade pieces bought on advisors' recommendations. Nothing selected with passion or insight. The offer was another leash. Another way to bring me to heel. "I'm doing fine on my own." I told her, "Are you?" Her smile was sharp. "From what we understand, gallery curation barely pays the rent in New York. It's time to be practical, Cassandra." I didn't bother explaining that my personal collection hidden away in that storage facility had recently been valued at over $2 million. Let her think I was struggling. Let her believe I would eventually come crawling back. What I didn't realize then was that my quiet rebellion was about to collide with a family secret that would change everything. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, forwarded from my old apartment. The return address showed a law firm I didn't recognize, and inside was a brief note explaining they were executing the estate of Walter Harrington, my maternal grandfather, who had died 20 years earlier. Apparently, a provision in his will specified that certain information be delivered to his grandchildren on their 32nd birthdays. I had just celebrated mine the previous month. Enclosed was a sealed envelope with my name written in spidery handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter and a small key. "My dear Cassandra," the letter began, "if you're reading this, I've been gone a long time, and you've grown into a woman I wish I could have known. There are things about our family your mother may never have told you." I sat down hard on my sofa. I had only vague memories of my grandfather, a tall man with kind eyes who died when I was 12. My mother rarely spoke of him except to occasionally mention that he had squandered opportunities and lacked business sense. The letter continued revealing a side of my grandfather I'd never known. Walter Harrington hadn't been the financial failure Eleanor had described. He'd been an art collector with an exceptional eye, building a collection through the 952nd and 62nd, when many now valuable artists were still affordable. The collection had been his passion kept separate from the family business. "Your grandmother never understood my interest in these scribblings, as she called them," he wrote. "Your mother inherited her practical nature, but you, even as a child, showed a spark of curiosity about beauty that reminded me of myself." My hands were shaking. Grandfather wrote that before his death, concerned that his collection would be sold off piecemeal for quick profit, he had placed the bulk of it in a secured storage facility with a 50-year prepaid lease. The key in the envelope would open it. Most importantly, he had created a legal trust naming his grandchildren as direct beneficiaries, bypassing Eleanor entirely. "The collection is yours and your cousin's now," he concluded, "though I suspect you may be the only one who truly appreciates what it contains. Trust your eye, Cassandra. It will serve you better than any balance sheet." I couldn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called in sick to work and took a train to Philadelphia, where the storage facility was located. Finding it took hours. The address was in an industrial area that had been partially redeveloped. When I finally located the building now, a specialized art storage business operating under a different name, I feared the worst. Incredibly, they still had records of the trust. After verifying my identity, A manager led me through climate-controlled hallways to a large private room. He unlocked the outer door, then left me to use my grandfather's key on the inner one. Nothing could have prepared me for what I found inside. The room was filled with carefully stored paintings, sculptures, and portfolios of works on paper. At a glance, I recognized pieces by artists whose early works I had studied in textbooks, abstract expressionists, early pop artists, minimalists who had later become legendary. These weren't just good pieces. They were important works from critical periods in each artist's development. I spent hours going through everything, taking photographs, checking signatures. With each piece, my amazement grew. My grandfather had collected these artists when they were still emerging, when their work was affordable to a man of modest wealth but excellent taste. Now, many of these pieces would fetch millions at auction. The next day, I contacted Elaine Harrison, an art lawyer I'd worked with on authentication issues. After explaining the situation and showing her photographs in the letter, she agreed to help me verify ownership and assess the collection properly. If these are authentic, and if the trust documentation is solid, she said carefully. You're sitting on a fortune, Cassandra. But family claims can get complicated. We need to move carefully. Over the next few months, we worked systematically. Elaine verified the legal standing of the trust. It was ironclad. The collection legally belonged to the grandchildren with provisions for professional management until we claimed it. My cousins on my mother's side, distant relations I barely knew, would need to be informed eventually. But as the one who had discovered the collection, I had first right to oversee its management. Meanwhile, I brought in trusted experts to authenticate key pieces. Each confirmation brought both elation and strategic concerns. One painting alone, an early masterpiece by an artist who had died young, was valued at $12 million. The total collection was worth upwards of $70 million. I faced an ethical dilemma. Legally, I wasn't obligated to inform my mother immediately. The trust had been deliberately structured to bypass her, but keeping such a massive discovery secret felt deceptive. I confided in Daniel, finally showing him photographs of the collection. Your grandfather wanted you to have this, he said after hearing the whole story. He specifically arranged for you to learn about it away from your mother's influence. But $70 million, Daniel, that changes everything. Only if you let it, he replied. The question is, what would you do differently knowing you have this security? His question made me realize I wouldn't change much about my current life. I loved my work, our apartment, the life we were building. The collection represented freedom and security, not a reason to transform into someone else. I decided to secure the collection first before any announcements. Working with Elaine, I had everything properly insured and relocated to a state-of-the-art storage facility in New York, under the management of a new trust I controlled. We also researched the provenance of every piece, ensuring my grandfather had acquired everything legally and ethically. The process took nearly 6 months of intense secret work. All the while, life continued normally on the surface. I took on new clients, visited galleries, had dinner with Daniel's parents. Occasionally, Eleanor called, usually to remind me about some family obligation or to subtly inquire whether I was still managing to make ends meet in my little career. Each conversation required more restraint than the last. I was sitting on information that would completely reshape our family dynamics. Yet, I couldn't share it until everything was legally secured. The weight of the secret was enormous, but also strangely empowering. For the first time in my life, I held knowledge that would force Eleanor to see me differently. As the legal work neared completion, I received an engraved invitation to Eleanor's 65th birthday celebration 2 months away. The timing seemed almost preordained. By then, everything would be finalized. It would be the perfect opportunity to finally reveal what I discovered and who I had become without her help or approval. The weeks leading up to Eleanor's birthday were filled with increasing pressure from my family. Eleanor called twice to confirm my attendance. Each conversation laced with comments about my career choices. James has just been made partner, she mentioned casually during our second call. Youngest in the firm's history. That's wonderful, I replied, gritting my teeth. Please congratulate him for me. He's always had such focus, she continued. The Blackwell Drive. Speaking of which, Richard and I have been discussing your future again. There's still that position managing the family art assets. Given your experience, it might be the perfect fit. This was a familiar pattern. Dangling opportunities that came with invisible strings attached. Return to Boston. Work under Richard's supervision. Admit that my independent path had been a mistake. Accept my place as the less successful child who needed rescuing. I'm actually quite busy with several important clients right now. I responded a half-truth that avoided outright rejection. Clients, Eleanor echoed, making the words sound like a hobby. Well, do clear your schedule for the birthday weekend. The family photographer will be there, and we need everyone present for the foundation portraits. The Blackwell Family Foundation was Eleanor and Richard's latest project, a charitable organization that conveniently burnished the family's social credentials while providing tax advantages. The website and promotional materials would feature perfectly coordinated family photos, projecting unity and success. 2 weeks before the birthday dinner, my half-sister Amanda called. Unlike Eleanor's strategic manipulations, Amanda's approach was direct condescension. "Mom's worried you'll show up looking like a bohemian artist," she said, without preamble. "The dinner is at Leonard, and there will be board members from the foundation there. Could you maybe wear something appropriate? I could help you shop if you need money for a proper dress." At 32, with a successful career and my own substantial assets being spoken to like a wayward teenager, was infuriating. But I swallowed my pride. "I think I can manage to dress myself, Amanda. But thanks for your concern. Just trying to help," she replied with artificial sweetness. "Oh, and James mentioned you should prepare a short toast. Something about how Mom's guidance has shaped your life. Nothing too personal." After hanging up, I paced my apartment fuming. They were scripting my behavior down to the words I should say, as if I were an actress hired to play the grateful daughter. For a moment, I considered not going at all. But the thought of my grandfather's collection now legally secured and waiting to be revealed gave me strength. This performance would be my last. The following weekend, I attended my cousin Sophia's wedding in Connecticut. Eleanor and Richard were there holding court among relatives and making sure everyone knew about James's partnership and Amanda's law review publication. I kept to myself, mostly chatting with distant relatives who seemed less entangled in family politics. My Aunt Martha, Eleanor's younger sister, who had always been the family rebel, cornered me by the dessert table. "You look different," she observed, studying my face. Calmer, more certain. "I'm doing well," I replied cautiously. Martha and Eleanor had a complicated relationship, and I wasn't sure where her loyalties lay. "William would be proud," she said unexpectedly, mentioning my father. "He always said, you had a steel spine under all that gentleness." Her comment took me by surprise. "You and Dad were close. Close enough that he talked about his concerns," she said, lowering her voice, "about Eleanor's plans for the family money, about making sure you were protected." Before I could ask what she meant, Richard appeared smoothly, inserting himself into our conversation and steering it toward safer topics. But Martha's knowing glance stayed with me, suggesting she might have insights into family history I had never heard. The incident made me realize how much information might have been kept from me over the years. How many family stories had been shaped to fit Eleanor's preferred narrative? How many relationships had been carefully managed to control what I knew? Back in New York, I threw myself into preparations. I selected a dress that was impeccably appropriate yet distinctly my own style. Midnight blue silk with architectural lines that subtly referenced a favorite painting. I had Elaine prepare a summary of the trust documentation condensed to key points that could be quickly understood in a public setting. Daniel watched these preparations with a mixture of concern and admiration. "Are you sure you want to do this at her birthday dinner?" he asked one evening. "It's going to be explosive." "That's exactly why it needs to be there," I explained. "Private confrontations with Eleanor always end the same way. She dismisses, deflects, and rewrites the narrative afterward. I need witnesses. I need to change the power dynamic completely." The night before the dinner, I received a text from an unknown number. "Whatever happens tomorrow, remember, you have allies." And Martha, I assumed. The message was cryptic but reassuring. I wasn't as alone in this family battle as I had thought. When the day finally arrived, I felt strangely calm. Years of tension were about to culminate in a single evening. Whatever happened by tomorrow, everything would be different. Daniel kissed me goodbye at our apartment door. "Text me when it's done," he said. "I'll be nearby if you need me." I nodded, grateful for his support, but knowing this was a confrontation I needed to face alone. The car Eleanor had sent arrived precisely on time. As we drove toward the restaurant, I thought about my grandfather's letter and the unexpected legacy he had left me. Not just valuable art, but the courage to claim my own place in the world. The stage was set, the players were gathering, and for the first time in my life, I controlled the final act. Leonardin gleamed with understated luxury as I arrived. The maitre recognized the Blackwell name, immediately escorting me to a private dining room at the back of the restaurant. Crystal glasses caught the light from modern chandeliers, and arrangements of white roses centered each table. Everything reflected Eleanor's aesthetic. Expensive but restrained, impressive without being flashy. Richard was already there, talking intently with two older men I recognized as board members of the Blackwell Foundation. He nodded at my arrival but didn't interrupt his conversation. James stood nearby, his Harvard class ring prominently displayed as he gestured with a scotch glass, entertaining Amanda and her husband with some anecdote about a business deal. My cousin Thomas spotted me first, breaking away from a conversation to greet me with genuine warmth. "Cassandra, it's been ages." His easy smile reminded me of summer vacations before family dynamics had become so strained. "How's the art world treating you?" "It's been an interesting year," I replied, accepting the glass of champagne a server offered. "How's the medical practice?" Thomas was the family outlier, a pediatrician who had chosen community health over lucrative private practice. Eleanor tolerated his choices because the doctor in the family still carried social weight, even if he wasn't maximizing his earning potential. "Rewarding and exhausting," he laughed. "Though I doubt either of us will get much attention tonight. The Eleanor show is about to begin." As if on cue, my Aunt Martha arrived, elegant in deep purple and trailing her much younger boyfriend. She made a beeline for me, kissing my cheek and whispering, "Stand your ground tonight, whatever happens." Before I could respond, there was a subtle shift in the room's energy. Eleanor had arrived. At 65, my mother remained striking, tall and slim, with perfectly colored blonde hair and the kind of confident posture money can't buy, but privilege often bestows. She wore a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, accented with a single strand of pearls I recognized as a family heirloom. Richard immediately moved to her side, playing the devoted husband. James and Amanda approached next, forming the perfect family tableau. I remained where I was watching the performance with new eyes. Everything from Eleanor's carefully timed entrance to the strategic family grouping was choreographed to reinforce the narrative she had created about our family. Eventually, Eleanor made her way around the room, graciously accepting birthday wishes. When she reached me, her smile remained fixed, but her eyes turned appraising, noting every detail of my appearance. "Cassandra, you look well." The pause was deliberate. "I'm glad you could fit this into your schedule." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied honestly. "Happy birthday, Mother." I handed her a small, elegantly wrapped package. Inside was a first edition of a book on early American art collectors. A meaningful gift for someone who would soon learn about Walter Harrington's collection. Eleanor thanked me with the automatic politeness she'd perfected for receiving gifts she didn't particularly want. Dinner proceeded with the practiced rhythm of wealth. Multiple courses served by unobtrusive staff wine pairings selected by a sommelier conversation that carefully avoided anything too personal or controversial. I participated, minimally observing the family dynamics with newfound clarity. How had I never noticed how frequently Richard spoke over Eleanor? How James mimicked his stepfather's dismissive hand gesture when female relatives spoke? How Amanda's apparently confident statements always ended with a glance toward Eleanor for approval? After the main course, Eleanor stood, drawing all attention. "Before dessert, I want to thank everyone for celebrating with me today." Her voice carried the absolute assurance of someone who has never questioned their place in the world. Reaching 65 gives one perspective on what truly matters: family legacy, the values we pass on. Murmurs of agreement circled the table as she continued speaking about the foundation's work and the importance of family unity. Then her tone shifted subtly. "Part of responsible family leadership is making difficult decisions about the future," she said, her gaze sweeping the table before landing on me. "Which is why Richard and I have recently updated our estate planning." The room quieted. This was unexpected. Discussing financial matters at a birthday celebration broke the usual social rules. "Most arrangements remain as previously established," Eleanor continued smoothly. "With one exception." She paused for effect. "After considerable reflection, we've decided to remove Cassandra from the primary inheritance structure." The silence turned shocked. Even those familiar with our strained relationship seemed surprised by the public announcement. I felt every eye in the room turn to me, expressions ranging from embarrassment to morbid curiosity. "This isn't a decision we've made lightly," Eleanor added, her voice softening with practiced concern. "But Cassandra has repeatedly chosen to distance herself from family responsibilities and opportunities. The Blackwell legacy requires stewardship from those committed to its values." Richard nodded solemnly beside her. James studied his water glass while Amanda's expression mixed sympathy and satisfaction. The foundation board members looked uncomfortable but unsurprised. Eleanor wasn't finished. We've instead established a smaller trust that will provide basic security managed by the family office to ensure responsible use. Sometimes the kindest form of love is structural guidance. The condescension was breathtaking, positioning my disinheritance as an act of benevolent parenting rather than punishment for independence. In years past, this moment would have devastated me, triggering shame and self-doubt. Now it felt almost liberating. I smiled, a genuine smile that clearly unsettled Eleanor. She had expected tears, anger, or embarrassed silence, not calm amusement. "Would you like to share what you find so entertaining, Cassandra?" she asked, the first hint of annoyance, cracking her perfect composure. "Actually, I would." I stood my voice steady. "That doesn't matter anymore, Mom, because I recently discovered something interesting about our family history." Eleanor's smile froze as I reached for my purse, removing the folder Elaine had prepared. "Did you know that Grandfather Walter was an art collector?" I asked conversationally, as if discussing a mild curiosity rather than a family-altering revelation. "My father dabbled in purchasing some paintings," Eleanor dismissed. "Nothing significant." "That's not entirely accurate," I continued, opening the folder. 6 months ago, I received a letter and key that Grandfather arranged to have delivered on my 32nd birthday. It led me to a storage facility in Philadelphia, containing an art collection he built throughout his lifetime. I slid a photograph across the table, one of the most valuable paintings from the collection. "This is just one piece. The full collection includes over 200 works, many by artists who are now considered masters." Richard reached for the photo, his expression sharpening with sudden interest. "This appears to be an early masterpiece valued at approximately $12 million. I completed his sentence. "Yes, it is." Eleanor's face had gone pale. "If such a collection exists, it would naturally be part of the family estate that I manage." "That's the interesting part," I replied, removing the trust documentation summary. "Grandfather established an irrevocable trust, naming his grandchildren as beneficiaries. The collection legally belongs to me and my cousins, not to you, Mother." I handed copies of the summary to Richard and the 2 board members. "The total appraised value of the collection is just over $70 million. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. Amanda's mouth actually fell open. James looked like he'd been slapped. "This is absurd," Eleanor finally managed. "My father would never have created a trust that bypassed you completely," I finished. "But he did. The documentation has been thoroughly verified by top art lawyers. The trust is ironclad." Martha was smiling openly now, raising her wine glass slightly in my direction. Thomas looked stunned but impressed. "As I've spent the last 6 months properly securing, ensuring, and authenticating the collection," I continued, "I've had time to reflect on what Grandfather might have wanted. He believed in art as a cultural legacy, not just a financial asset. So, while I'm happy to discuss my cousin's shares in the trust, I won't be selling pieces to maximize short-term profit." Richard's expression had transformed from shock to calculation. "This requires further discussion in a more private setting. Family matters shouldn't be announced publicly," I interrupted. "I agree completely. Yet, here we are." Eleanor's composure finally cracked. "You've known about this for months and said nothing while we've been concerned about your financial security, your future." "Yes," I acknowledged simply. "I've known just as you've known about the trusts my father established for me that were mysteriously altered after his death. Just as you've known about the family history you've selectively edited to maintain control. The restaurant suddenly felt too small, too public for the family earthquake taking place. But there was no stopping now." Eleanor's face flushed with anger. "How dare you ambush me at my birthday dinner with these ridiculous accusations? Whatever your grandfather left was family property that he had every legal right to dispose of as he wished." I cut in my voice calm but firm, just as you apparently had every right to announce cutting me from your will in front of everyone. The difference is, I'm not trying to control anyone else with my inheritance." Richard attempted to take charge of the situation. "This is inappropriate. We should continue this discussion privately with our attorneys present." "My attorneys have already completed all necessary legal work," I replied. "The collection is secured, authenticated, and properly managed through the trust." "This isn't a negotiation, Richard. It's a notification." James leaned forward, his business instincts kicking in. "If there's truly a collection worth $70 million, surely as family, we should all benefit. What about Amanda and me?" "The trust specifically names grandchildren of Walter Harrington," I explained. That includes me, Thomas, and our cousins Sophia and Michael, not step-G grandchildren. Amanda's face hardened. That's convenient for you, isn't it? Suddenly discovering a fortune that excludes us after all these years of what, Amanda? I asked quietly. Years of being reminded I was less important than you and James. Years of having every career choice questioned, every accomplishment diminished. Don't pretend we've ever been treated equally in this family. The waiter chose that unfortunate moment to approach with dessert carts. Eleanor waved him away with an imperious gesture. You've clearly orchestrated this announcement to cause maximum embarrassment, she hissed, dropping all pretense of composure. This vindictive display proves exactly why you shouldn't be trusted with significant assets. I didn't orchestrate anything. Mother-grandfather made these arrangements 20 years ago, and the timing of this dinner was your choice. But yes, I did wait until everything was legally secured before telling you, given your history of controlling family resources. That seemed prudent. Thomas cleared his throat. I think we should all take a moment to stay out of this. Eleanor snapped at him before turning back to me. You have no idea what you're doing. Art collections require sophisticated management, international connections, tax strategies. Actually, that's exactly what I do for a living, I reminded her. I manage important collections for clients around the world. I've built a career you've consistently belittled as playing shopgirl, when in reality, I've become one of the most respected advisors in my field. Richard tried a different approach. Cassandra, no one is questioning your enthusiasm for art, but managing assets of this magnitude requires experience with wealth. Let us help you make wise decisions about the way you helped yourselves to funds from my father's trust, I asked pointedly. The room went silent. I hadn't planned to bring this up, but the memories had been simmering for years. I don't know what you're talking about, Eleanor said too quickly. When I turned 25, I had an independent financial advisor review the trust data established for me, I explained. The original documents showed it should have been worth nearly twice what was actually there. Significant management fees had been extracted along with several investments in Blackwell projects that mysteriously underperformed. Martha spoke up unexpectedly. William always worried about that. He told me he'd established protections, but after his death, Mother took control. I finished just like she's controlled every narrative in this family. How grandfather was a failed businessman rather than a visionary collector. How my career is a frivolous hobby rather than a professional success. How everything revolves around the almighty Blackwell name and legacy. Eleanor stood abruptly. I will not be spoken to this way by my own daughter. You have no idea the sacrifices I've made for this family, the work required to build and maintain what we have. I understand sacrifice better than you think, I replied. I've built my career without using the family name or connections. I've worked multiple jobs to avoid taking money with strings attached. I've created my own security when you offered only conditional support. The two foundation board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly wishing they were elsewhere. One of them murmured something about family matters and began gathering his things. Eleanor recognized the social damage spreading and shifted tactics immediately. Her expression softened into practiced concern. Cassandra, darling, you're clearly upset. We only want what's best for you. Perhaps we should discuss this tomorrow when emotions aren't running so high. The sudden switch to performative motherly concern was so transparent it almost made me laugh. I'm not upset, Mother. For the first time in years, I'm perfectly clear about where we stand. I don't need to be included in your will or your family portraits or your foundation publicity. I have my own path now. Richard tried one last angle. The legal challenges to this supposed trust would be extensive. Art of that value hidden away for decades. Questions of proper provenance tax implications already addressed, I assured him. Grandfather kept meticulous records of every purchase. The collection has been properly reported to tax authorities with all necessary filings completed. And most importantly, the art itself is now in a secure location that only the trust administrators can access. Eleanor's face had gone from flushed to ashen. She suddenly looked every day of her 65 years. You've been planning this for months. I've been building an independent life for years, I corrected. Finding the collection simply confirmed I was on the right path all along. Amanda, never one for subtlety, got to the heart of her concerns. So what happens to the art? Do we each get pieces? Is it being sold? What's our share worth? The trust is structured to keep the collection intact for at least 10 years, I explained. After that, decisions will be made collectively by the beneficiaries, with preference given to museum donations for significant pieces. Grandfather was clear that he valued cultural legacy over liquidation value. The look of horror on Amanda's face at the mention of donations would have been comical in another context. James was already on his phone. likely texting his personal attorney. Eleanor had recovered enough composure to attempt damage control with the remaining guests. "This is all quite unexpected," she said with a forced laugh. "Family surprises on my birthday. Now, who would like coffee with dessert?" The obvious attempt to normalize the situation failed completely. The room had the stunned atmosphere of a battlefield after an unexpected explosion. Martha caught my eye and nodded slightly. Approval from the family rebel. I stood and gathered my things. "I think I'll skip dessert. Thank you for the invitation, Mother. Happy birthday. You're leaving." Eleanor's voice held genuine surprise. In all our previous conflicts, I had eventually backed down, apologized, accommodated. Not this time. "Yes, Daniel is waiting for me." I turned to the other guests. I apologized for the disruption to the celebration. As I moved toward the door, I heard Richard mutter, "We'll fight this, Eleanor. Trust documentation can be challenged." I paused at the threshold. One last thing. Grandfather's letter mentioned that he always regretted how the family business overshadowed appreciation for beauty and creativity. He hoped his collection might change that for future generations. Perhaps consider that before launching legal challenges that would only deplete the very assets you're so eager to control. With that, I walked out, leaving behind the stunned silence of a family whose power dynamics had irrevocably shifted. Outside the restaurant, the summer evening felt fresh and full of possibility. I texted Daniel, "It's done. Coming home." For the first time in my life, I was walking away from family drama without carrying its weight on my shoulders. Whatever storms would follow, I was finally standing on ground of my own making. The weeks following Eleanor's birthday dinner were predictably chaotic. As promised, Richard mobilized a legal team to challenge the trust, claiming that Walter Harrington had not been of sound mind when creating it. Their case fell apart quickly when grandfather's attorney, now in his 80s but still sharp, provided videotape testimony of the trust's creation, explicitly stating Walter's reasons for bypassing Eleanor. He believed his daughter lacked appreciation for art beyond its monetary value, the elderly lawyer testified. And he worried about her tendency to control rather than nurture the next generation. Mother attempted a different approach, calling me directly for the first time since the dinner. Her voice carried none of its usual commanding tone when she suggested we work together as a family to manage the collection. "I've always appreciated fine art, Cassandra," she claimed as if I hadn't witnessed her dismissing it my entire life. "We could create something meaningful together." "The trust is already creating something meaningful," I replied. "We're establishing a foundation to support emerging artists and education programs." The conversation ended abruptly when she realized I wouldn't be manipulated into sharing control. 3 days later, Amanda called with yet another angle. "Mom's really hurt by all this," she began, her voice heavy with manufactured concern. "Her health isn't great, you know, the stress of this situation." "Amanda," I interrupted gently. "I spent 32 years trying to earn Mother's approval. I'm not responsible for her emotional reaction to grandfather's decisions." My half-sister's tone changed instantly. "You've turned your back on this family after everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Amanda? When have you ever treated me as an equal rather than an obligation?" Her silence was answer enough. Meanwhile, I moved forward with plans for the collection. Working with my cousins, who were shocked but delighted by their unexpected inheritance, we established the Harrington Arts Trust. Thomas, with his community focus, championed educational programs for underserved schools. Sophia, always practical, helped develop a sustainable financial structure. Together, we selected 30 pieces for a special exhibition called The Hidden Collector: Walter Harrington's Visionary Eye. The exhibition opened at a prestigious New York gallery 6 months after the birthday dinner confrontation. I invited the entire family, not expecting many to attend. To my surprise, Aunt Martha arrived with her, boyfriend proudly touring the exhibition and telling stories about her. Father's secret passion for art. He used to take me to galleries sometimes when Eleanor was busy with social obligations. She revealed she never knew it was our special connection. More surprising was the arrival of James alone and unusually subdued. He moved through the exhibition slowly, actually looking at the paintings rather than checking their value placards. "I didn't know art could feel this way," he admitted when we spoke briefly. "Growing up, it was always just assets on walls in our house." "That's exactly what grandfather wanted to change," I told him. James nodded thoughtfully. "Mother and Richard aren't coming tonight, obviously. But I'd like to learn more about this, about what our grandfather saw in these works." It wasn't an apology, but it was an opening. The first genuine connection we'd shared in years. The exhibition received significant press coverage, with art critics praising Walter Harrington's Pre and I, and the family's decision to share the collection publicly. Several museums expressed interest in eventual donations of key pieces. What began as a private inheritance was evolving into a cultural contribution. Through it all, Daniel remained my steadfast support, never once suggesting we change our lives because of my newfound wealth. "This gives you freedom to do exactly what you've always wanted," he observed. No more or less than that. He was right. The collection provided security, but I continued my curatorial work now with the added freedom to champion artists I believed in without financial pressure. We moved to a slightly larger apartment, but stayed in the same neighborhood we loved. The most significant change was being able to establish a scholarship fund for art students from disadvantaged backgrounds, creating opportunities I wished had existed when I was struggling to find my way. 3 months after the exhibition, Eleanor reached out again, this time through her assistant, requesting a meeting. After careful consideration, I agreed to coffee at a neutral location. She arrived precisely on time, looking older and less formidable than I remembered. We exchanged polite greetings before she came to her point. The exhibition was impressive, she admitted. Several of our foundation board members attended and couldn't stop talking about it. I'm glad they enjoyed it. Eleanor studied her coffee cup. Your grandfather and I had a complicated relationship. He never approved of my focus on financial security. He had different priorities, I acknowledged, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. Perhaps I've been inflexible about certain things, she continued clearly, struggling with each word. Your career path, for instance. Coming from Eleanor, this halting near admission was the equivalent of a dramatic apology. I decided to meet her halfway. We've both been stubborn, I offered. I could have communicated better about my choices instead of simply withdrawing. A brief silence settled between us. Not comfortable, but not hostile either. Different, like everything else in our new reality. The family Christmas gathering is next month, Eleanor said finally. The invitation remains open to you and Daniel. Of course, it wasn't reconciliation exactly, but it was acknowledgement. The power balance had shifted permanently, allowing space for a different kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than control and rebellion. Well, consider it, I replied honestly. As winter turned to spring, my life found a new rhythm. The Harrington Arts Trust flourished, supporting exhibitions and educational programs. Daniel and I got engaged, planning a small ceremony focused on close friends rather than family obligations. I maintained cautious contact with Eleanor, accepting that our relationship would never be warm, but could perhaps be respectful. Most importantly, I continued building a life that honored both my father's support and my grandfather's unexpected legacy. Not just financial security, but the courage to see beauty where others saw only asset values. In the quiet moments, usually while walking through museums or sitting in my office surrounded by art books, I sometimes imagined my grandfather and father watching my journey with pride. They had each in their own way tried to protect my independence and creative spirit. Their efforts had been imperfect, interrupted by death and family politics. But in the end, they had succeeded, not by shielding me from difficulty, but by planting seeds of resilience that grew stronger through each challenge. The greatest inheritance wasn't the art collection, valuable as it was. It was the freedom to define success on my own terms, to build a life around passion, rather than obligation. In finding my grandfather's hidden legacy, I had ultimately discovered my own path forward. One painting, one choice, one brave moment at a time. Have you ever had to stand up to family expectations to follow your own path? What gave you the courage to finally draw that line? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this tale of finding strength and independence resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to claim your own legacy. Thank you for listening to my journey. May you find the courage to honor yours.